We all know you're here with us on the deep dive because you like to get to the bottom of things. And today we are really diving into something fascinating.
Yeah.
This connection between our hearing and brain health, and specifically the link between hearing loss and dementia.
Absolutely. And, this isn't just some fringe theory anymore. We've been looking at a lot of recent research, particularly from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
Right.
And what's really striking right off the bat is just how widespread this issue is. The National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders estimates something like 37.5 million Americans
Wow.
have some level of hearing difficulty.
That's a huge number, and it leads to this very intriguing question that's driving a lot of the research, which is, could something as simple as using hearing aids actually lower someone's risk of developing dementia later on?
Yeah.
It seems like the science is suggesting more than just that these two conditions sometimes appear together, but that the hearing loss itself might contribute to the cognitive decline.
Yeah, you're right on the money with that. And this idea really gained traction with a landmark report from the Lancet Commission back in 2020.
Okay.
Now, this was a group of international experts, and they reviewed all the evidence on dementia risk factors, and they specifically highlighted hearing loss as one of the top modifiable risk factors for dementia.
So it's not just correlation, then there's a real possibility of cause and effect here.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
How could something seemingly limited to our ears have such a big impact on brain health and potentially increase the risk of dementia?
Well, there are several really compelling theories that researchers are exploring, and one of the leading ones is the idea of brain strain.
Brain strain.
Yeah, think of it this way. If you're struggling to hear what people are saying, your brain has to work extra hard to decode those sounds, fill in the gaps, and make sense of the conversation. It's kind of like trying to listen to a radio station with a lot of static.
Oh, I get it. Like trying to follow a conversation in a really noisy restaurant or at a concert.
Exactly. You're straining to catch words, and it's exhausting.
Right.
And the theory is that this constant extra effort it takes to process sound might actually take resources away from other important brain functions.
Interesting.
Things like memory, attention, and thinking clearly. Your brain has a limited amount of energy.
Right.
And if one area is always working overtime, others might not get the fuel they need.
That makes sense. So
Yeah.
like your brain is multitasking too much, and eventually some things start to slip.
Exactly. Now, in addition to the brain simply working harder, there's also a possibility of actual physical changes happening.
Okay.
Some research suggests that hearing loss might be linked to faster brain shrinkage as we get older.
Brain shrinkage. That sounds a little scary.
Well, it's a natural part of aging, but the rate can really differ between people. And the research suggests that hearing loss might be a factor that speeds up that process, potentially impacting parts of the brain that are really crucial for cognitive function.
Okay, so we've got the brain overworking and possibly some physical changes happening. What else connects hearing loss to dementia risk?
Well, there's the social isolation aspect. You
Right.
see, our ability to hear is so fundamental to how we interact with others.
Of course.
If you can't hear, well, it can be really difficult and frustrating to participate in conversations, to enjoy social gatherings,
Absolutely.
to feel connected.
I can see that.
Constantly asking people to repeat themselves, missing jokes, or important parts of the conversation. It's isolating, and you might just withdraw from social situations.
It's true. I think we've all been there, even with mild hearing issues. It can be really tiring to constantly strain to hear.
And that social withdrawal has been shown to be a major risk factor for brain health as we age.
Yeah.
Staying connected with others, being intellectually stimulated, having conversations, these are all so important to keep our brains active and healthy.
Yeah.
If hearing loss leads to social withdrawal, the brain is not getting the same level of stimulation.
Right.
So it becomes the sort of negative feedback loop.
It sounds like a perfect storm then. The brain working harder, possible physical changes in the brain, and less social interaction, all stemming from hearing loss and all potentially increasing the risk of cognitive decline.
That's the emerging picture from the research.
So when you look at the numbers, this potential impact becomes pretty significant.
Oh, absolutely.
They estimate that hearing loss could account for about 8% of all dementia cases.
That's right.
8%. That might not sound like a lot at first,
Mm-hmm.
but when you consider how many people are affected by dementia globally,
It's massive.
yeah,
It's estimated that hearing loss could be responsible for as many as 800,000.
wow.
of the nearly 10 million new cases of dementia diagnosed every year worldwide.
That's a really substantial number of people whose cognitive health could be directly tied to their hearing.
It is.
So it's not just about identifying a problem here.
Mm.
There's real hope in terms of potential interventions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is where a really important large-scale study led by Johns Hopkins comes in. This is funded by the National Institute on Aging.
Okay, so tell us a bit about what they're doing in this study.
Well, they've recruited almost 1,000 participants
Okay.
between the ages of 70 and 84, all of whom have some degree of hearing loss.
Mm-hmm.
And they've divided them into two groups. One group is receiving hearing aids,
Okay.
so directly addressing their hearing loss. The other group is participating in what they call aging education.
Okay.
This includes information on diet, exercise, mental stimulation, all the typical advice for healthy aging.
Right.
So this second group acts as a control group, allowing the researchers to directly compare the outcomes of those using hearing aids with those receiving general healthy aging guidance.
Oh, so they're not just looking at whether people's hearing improves with the aids,
Right.
but whether treating the hearing loss has a measurable effect on their cognitive health over time.
Exactly. The main goal is to see if treating hearing loss with hearing aids can actually lower the risk of cognitive decline
Okay.
and possibly slow down brain aging in older adults.
When can we expect to see results from this research?
Well, the latest information suggests the study should have some definitive findings by early 2023.
Wow. So pretty soon.
Yeah, we're expecting some really important data relatively soon, which could totally change how we approach both hearing loss and dementia prevention in the future.
So if it turns out that something as readily available as hearing aids could make a real difference in dementia risk, that would be incredible.
It would be a game changer.
But the impact of hearing loss doesn't seem to stop at cognitive decline.
No, you're absolutely right. The research highlights a number of other health issues that are linked to hearing loss as well.
Okay, like what?
Well, for instance, there's a higher risk of falls
Really?
in people with hearing impairment.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
I guess if you're not getting all the auditory cues from your surroundings, you could be more likely to trip or fall.
that's one possible explanation. It could also be because our auditory system plays a role in spatial awareness and balance.
Huh.
So impaired hearing can actually directly affect our stability.
That's interesting. I never thought of that.
There's also a strong connection between hearing loss and mental health.
Oh, right.
Studies have shown a higher risk of depression in people with hearing loss.
That makes sense. It must be very isolating to struggle to communicate.
It is. And it can be incredibly frustrating as well, always having to ask people to repeat themselves,
Right.
missing out on conversations.
So it all ties back to that social isolation piece we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
But also it seems to highlight how important our sense of hearing is, not just for communication, but for our overall well-being.
You got it. And then from a bigger picture perspective,
Yeah.
hearing loss also places a significant burden on healthcare systems.
How so?
Well, one study found that people with hearing loss have a 47% higher rate of hospitalization over a 10-year period.
Wow, 47%. That's a huge increase.
It is. It really emphasizes that addressing hearing loss is about much more than just being able to hear conversations better.
So it really seems like the research is painting a picture of hearing loss as a much more significant health concern than maybe we previously thought.
I think that's a fair assessment.
And a lot of this work and understanding this connection is thanks to dedicated researchers like Frank Lin.
Absolutely.
He's an MD, PhD, and the director of the Cochlear Center for Hearing and Public Health at the Bloomberg School.
Yeah, his work has been instrumental in this field.
It's fascinating how research keeps uncovering these unexpected links between seemingly separate aspects of our health. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways about the link between hearing loss and dementia that you think are most important for listeners to remember?
Well, first, I'd say the evidence is getting stronger and stronger that hearing loss isn't just correlated with dementia, but may actually be a major contributing factor. Second, there are several possible ways this might happen, including that increased cognitive strain. We talked about the potential for faster brain shrinkage and the negative effects of social isolation.
Right.
And third, the potential impact is enormous, with hearing loss potentially contributing to a large percentage of dementia cases globally. And lastly, there's real hope for the future with ongoing research, particularly this large Johns Hopkins study investigating if treating hearing loss with hearing aids can actually reduce the risk of cognitive decline.
So that big question, can hearing aids really reduce the risk of dementia?
Right.
That's what researchers are trying to figure out.
Exactly.
And the results from that study, which we're expecting early next year,
Right.
Those could have really major implications for public health and how we approach healthy aging.
They really could. It makes you think.
Yeah.
Even before we have those final results, it may be wise to be proactive about our hearing health. It's not just about being able to hear conversations better. It might actually be fundamentally connected to the long-term health of our brains.
It really shows how seemingly isolated health issues can have much broader and deeper effects on our overall well-being as we age.
Absolutely. It's fascinating, isn't it? We often think of hearing aids as improving our connection with the world around us.
Right.
But this research suggests they might be even more fundamental for maintaining our connection with ourselves, our own minds.
That's a really powerful thought to end on. Thanks so much for this deep dive. It's given me a lot to think about in terms of my own hearing health and the potential long-term benefits of addressing any issues.
My pleasure.
It's a great reminder to think about the bigger picture when it comes to our health.
I agree.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.